Well, I think it's 7:32, and to honor this time, we're going to just start. We're going to go right in, and we'll get started. This is meant to be a very safe, fun, casual space for everybody. So you are more than welcome to be here. This is going to be recorded so that we can share this after our discussions. So just so you all aware, we are recording. So I'll just give a little bit of an introduction, and then I'm going to pass it on to our moderator, Jennifer, to have the discussion get started. But my name is Mary Fox. I am the artistic director of Renegade Theater Company here in Duluth, and it is an honor to be here with this fine panel. And we did a show called Between that was written by the incredible Deryck Hak, and it was performed I think it closed October 30th, so very recently, and it brought up some pretty incredible themes that I think our community needs to discuss and be a part of, and also for a lot of us to listen and to hear how we can help affect change. So thank you for being here. If you have any questions about Zeitgeist or Renegade or theater or who I am, feel free to reach out. I would love to meet you. But without further ado, I'd love to introduce some beautiful people here on the panel today. And Deryck, why don't you give yourself a little introduction?
Hi, everybody. I'm Deryck Hak. I wrote Between and acted in it. I just graduated from the University of Minnesota Duluth with my BFA in acting. And I started writing this play with my professor, Tom Isbell, I think three or 4 years ago. So it's been a wild ride, and I've just been so blessed and honored to share this story with anybody who would listen and anybody who could connect with it. And it just warms my heart if I could inspire someone or share an experience that other people can relate to and share the story. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Deryck. How about Jennifer? Take it away, your intro.
Yes, hi, I'm Jennifer Lien. I use she, her pronouns, and I am here as the moderator for tonight's panel, representing the Twin Ports APIDA collective, TPAC for short. I'm on the organizational team for this group that was founded in April of this year, so a very young group. And I am a music instructor at the College of St. Scholastica. We've got, in addition to Deryck, two other panelists here who are part of our APIDA community. And it's a very special two people here because they not only represent the APIDA experience, but they also come from similar refugee immigrant backgrounds. So I'd like to ask first Pakou to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pakou Ly, and I use she, her pronouns. I am a Hmong American. My family moved to the United States in 1976 as the US troops were leaving Laos. And so I've lived here in Iowa and then relocated to Minnesota with my family, where the Hmong community was larger and we could reconnect with our culture and language and relatives. I've been up here in the Twin Ports area for just a little over 16 years. And I have a background in communications, community engagement, public policy, and in general, just public service.
Great, and we also have Suenary here tonight. And Suenary, would you introduce yourself first?
Hi, my name is Suenary, and I use she, her pronouns. I identify as a Cambodian and Lao-American. My mom was from Cambodia, my dad is from Laos. And I was born here in Minnesota, Rochester specifically. And I've been living there up until I moved up to Duluth for college. And I graduated from the University of Minnesota Duluth in 2020 with a BA in International Studies. And I've just been working up here since.
Thank you. Should we start the discussion, Mary?
Oh, I think we're ready. Thank you, everybody, for those introductions.
Okay, great. So did you want to go through ground rules, Mary?
Oh, sure. Yes, thank you. So what we're gonna talk, the panel is going to talk, led by Jennifer. We will allow questions as we get towards the end. We'll let you know when you can do that. Feel free to, if you want to raise your hand, that little hand thing. Is everyone familiar with it? You can do that, and myself and Stevie will kind of put the order in for questions. Yes, Deryck, thank you. Or you can put it in the chat, and then Stevie and I will also monitor that to make sure that that all works. And then if for some reason the internet goes kaput, we'll just come back onto this link. So we'll do our best, and take it away, Jennifer.
Okay, great. So I have a burning question. The night that I was there at the show, Deryck, I sat behind your parents, and I didn't realize they were your parents until afterwards, the meet and greet. And then I've been just wondering ever since they play a significant role in your story, what did they think about the play? And then how has that changed in the course of the story you tell until today, from starting writing the play until today? And also your play's been out there for about a year now. Like, I don't know how many times they've watched it and whether they think differently each time they've seen it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so after the performance, they were obviously super proud of me and seeing myself on stage and telling my story, but also it was hard for them to talk about the things that they went through in Cambodia, and I could just see it on their faces and in their eyes. And Tom can attest to this too. He was there during the conversation with my parents, and how it's hard for them to remember and all the things that they went through in Cambodia, but also on the contrary, it's super heartwarming to see that experience shared with other people. And because of that, they haven't seen my play very often. They have only seen it like up in Duluth and the very first rendition, and that's about it, because they don't want to expose themselves too much in that area, and I totally respect all of that. But I think something so special about that is it just has so many emotions behind it of, I'm honored to tell the story. It's so hard for them to relive it, but it's also something that's necessary, because having my uncle pass away during the Cambodian genocide and having his final words and then able to share that on this scale is something that I'm just so blessed to be doing. So it was a mixture of feelings, but overall, I think proud is the one to go to. And after they saw it, they're like, Deryck, when it comes out, can we send it to other family members? I'm like, yes, here's the code, here it goes. So all the family members are watching it and reaching out to me. And I feel like it's just making our relationship more closely knit as we're talking about it. Because I think it's so hard, especially growing up in an Asian household where sharing those kinds of things isn't necessarily the norm. So yeah, those are the feelings encompassing all of that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I did see your mom like wipe a little tear from her eye at the end of the performance. So it felt like a sacred moment. And I appreciate your sharing just kind of the mix of emotions that must have gone on within them and also with you. I want to ask Pakou and Suenary if there were any particular themes as you experienced the play that resonated with your lived experience. And if you could kind of answer by telling us a story from your life that might resonate with some of Deryck's story. Maybe I'll start with you, Pakou.
Sure. I think something that really resonated, in addition to, the self-discovery, but I think for me, it was really about the process of how Deryck, pursued to learn about his Cambodian history, Cambodian heritage. That's something that I've been here in the United States for over 40 years. And it's something that I continue to learn about, research. I'm fortunate enough to have my parents still alive because they are the holders of our family history. So being able to document that, and I give kudos to Deryck for being able to put it into a performance in a way to document your family history. It's something that I struggle to do with my family, harder to do now with COVID. But that self-discovery process, it was very clear from your play, and then also with my own experience, that it only happens when you learn to love yourself. It takes patience, it takes time, and in order for you to really dig deep and learn and grow from that self-awareness, you really have to love yourself. And so, that's something that I really, really found, my heart was beating in very heavily, very fast in some parts of the play, because it was just, I could just relate so much to what you went through. Even though my experience was, 30 plus years ago, it's, some of those transitions, that balance, it carries forward, no matter what time frame.
Suenary.
Hi. First, I would love to say to Deryck, I think that you really captured a very interesting and beautiful experience that you have, and I feel like I have experienced as well, being a fellow Cambodian American. It really hit home for me. A lot of the things that you went through with just being like, just trying to figure out who you are and where you fit in, and if you do fit in, and also trying to learn about your family's history, but not knowing much and having some sort of disconnection, because a lot of the things that we're curious about are not talked about within our families because of a lot of trauma, which is very understandable. But there's always this curiosity that you have, especially with being very close to your parents and your family, and always wondering why they react this way when certain things come up, or like just a general curiosity about like what your parents' life was like back in their home countries and things like that. And I had a very similar experience of trying, I still do, I still have a very similar experience of trying to figure out who I am. And I think that the way I explore my identity is always changing, always evolving, with more that I learn and more that I reflect on my experiences. And I think that my story is very connected with my parents' story. And part of learning who I am is also part of having to do with learning about who they are and the things that they've gone through. But also just remembering that my experiences can be different from my parents', and that their experiences don't really have to define me, because my own experiences are my own. So it's kind of just like trying to explore their histories, but also trying to explore who I am within those histories, but also without those histories, or outside of those histories, if that makes sense.
And if I could just add that, you know, my father and my uncles were soldiers that fought with the Hmong guerrillas during the Vietnam War, and that, you know, Deryck, your struggle of, you know, of being able to pull some of these stories out of your elders, and the fact that it's hard for them to talk about because there is post-traumatic stress there is trauma there. And I found that very common with my own father and with my uncles too, was because as much as they wanted to share their experiences, uh, they had trauma that they really had no idea how to address. They never sought therapy for it. They've never considered it as something that would be debilitating in how they could express to their children. And sometimes it came out in just a lot of anger. And so as much as, you know, we would try to pull things out, sometimes it was just extremely difficult because of the elders' trauma that they experienced.
Deryck and Suenary, do you, and Pakou, do you have any comments about what you've heard each other say so far? Any response to?
Yeah, so Pakou, when you were talking about all of that, I was having thoughts fire in my brain, and yeah, I relate to that so much because growing up, there would always feel like there was this disconnect of, oh, in a third world country, you wouldn't experience that. They would always throw that card at me, like, in a third world country, make sure your life, you have it so good, and you have make sure to eat all your food because in a third world country, this, and they kept bringing that up, and that always influenced my perception of like, oh, but we're in the United States, and that there was always this sort of disconnect, especially in arguments growing up. And I think this play has helped me come to terms with all of that and be more communicative and understanding of where my parents are coming from. And Suenary, I relate so much to your journey of, and the constant journey of figuring out who you are, and um, what did you say? That was so, that like, I was like, yes, me too. You said, my experience is different than my parents' experience, and I have to, you know, be okay with that. And I always go back to that of, oh, my parents had to come to this country and build their lives up again. So I'm up against that work ethic. And I think having that work ethic in my brain, I'm like, oh, I have to, if my parents did all that, I have this fire under my ass to, you know, like do something amazing with my life. But then I have to be like, okay, but also don't need to put so much pressure on yourself to, because you know that, yeah, so all of these things are happening at the same time, and I have to realize that, okay, I don't need a definite answer to that question either. Yes, those are my thoughts right now.
Thank you. I wonder, if you are discovering in your journeys that you are, and as you are connecting with your family's histories and making sense of where you come from, how you would define yourselves today as, you know, a second generation, or having first generation, having lived here for a very long time, like American, as well as the identifier of where you came from. Like, if you're not just your parents' story, who are you today? What are some adjectives or what are some identifiers that you would claim for yourself? Deryck.
Yeah, I would go, these are just some words that come into my mind, but Minnesotan for sure. Grew up, I don't know why that one was like, woohoo, Minnesota. So Minnesotan, Cambodian American, Midwesterner. Those are just like some definite labels. I'm like, yes, I gravitate towards that, but also first generation American, and yeah, those are the labels that I'm like, yes, that is who I am. And I always, this is like the theme of the play too. I always struggle with figuring out, oh, but your only experience is in Carver, Minnesota. So are you actually Cambodian? But then again, I have to be like, no, those are my roots. That's my ancestry, and I'm bringing that with me forward, and I'm choosing to do that. And I feel like Asian Americans nowadays have to be conscious of choosing to do that, to bring their culture forward, because it's so easy to be like, no, I grew up here. Yeah, that's where my family came from. But you know what? I'm just gonna, forget about that and move on. But I feel like you have to acknowledge of where you came from and bring that with you forward. Yeah. Those, if that answered your question, Jennifer.
Absolutely, thank you. I'm just curious. There's no right answer. It's just yeah, it's always lovely to hear where people are at today. Suenary.
Okay. So I guess, let me think. If I were gonna put like labels on it, just so like it would help me think a little bit more about myself, because I think that my identity, or like the way that I explore my identity, is always fluid. It's always changing. It's just like it changes because of something that I've discovered within myself, or within my family history, or with my experiences. So I'm going to do what Deryck did and kind of like list a couple of labels, I guess, that I have or fit into, I guess. So I am a Cambodian American and a Lao American. I'm a first generation American and a first generation college student in my family, and graduate in my family as well. And I am an Asian woman, a Cambodian or Khmer woman, a Lao woman. I would call myself a storyteller as well, and an explorer of identities, I guess. Right now, I think that as I'm thinking and speaking about this, I think how I see myself and my identity, or like my place in the world, I guess. I am a Cambodian woman and a Lao woman, and a lot of that influences my experiences and how I navigate my world. I can't just like separate those things. Like I can't separate my gender identity with my racial identity, because I think a lot of those are intertwined, and it's very important that I recognize that, because my experience is very different from my brother's experience and my dad's experience. And I guess right now, like, I don't have a definite answer. I think maybe I'll come back to this and touch on it later, but I just not really sure how to answer this question right now.
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be labels, right? Today or last night I had a conversation with my son who, when he was 5, he said, pizza's my favorite food. And now he's older, and we kind of were like, well, but pizza's your favorite food. And he's like, but I don't just love pizza. I like noodles, you know, and that's who he is, right? Even his tastes are morphing, right? So I think this question can be answered in so many different ways. Pakou.
Okay. So when I was growing up, you know, the Hmong community is very, you know, family centric, and just, you know, the thought that someone could date someone outside of the Hmong community was very unpopular, and because everything was about preserving your Hmong identity, your Hmong culture, your Hmong language, and your family unit. And so I never imagined myself, you know, through my teen years, I never imagined myself being considered bicultural, because it was ingrained in me that I was Hmong. So it wasn't until I became an adult that I realized, wow, I'm Hmong, but I'm also very American. And now, you know, I have a very much a bicultural family because I married somebody who's Chinese. And so I think, you know, even my 9-year-old is very self-aware. He's smarter than I am, but you know, we were having this conversation and he says, you know, Mom, most of my friends look at me and they just consider me white, but I know that I'm half Chinese and I'm half Hmong and I'm all Asian. So when I thought, wow, you know, that's where I can also identify myself, is not just, you know, a good daughter, mother, nurturer, but, you know, someone who is getting my kids ready for the future, raising them to be future leaders, to be good thinkers, to be kind people, to be good-hearted, to be innovators. And I think it's just a constant cycle of learning, you know, especially looking at my children, learning how I can help them to balance out, you know, and really appreciate and take pride in their multiple cultures that they're living in. So yeah, it's in interesting times, for sure, especially now as a parent versus just being a, you know, a single person.
Yeah, something that both of you said really stuck out to me, about the like dual or like double culture experience. Just because I grew up with the idea that in my home I'm too American, but like at school I'm too Asian, or I am Asian. And it was kind of hard to navigate those things, because you were supposed to be one way, not both ways. And it was, I think until actually really recently, like college, where I started to realize that I could be both, or I could be even more than just those two things. And that like my experience doesn't have to follow a certain way. Like I can still be a Cambodian woman and not have to like think or do certain things. And I can also still be American while still holding on to those cultural values and cultural beliefs that I have. And I think that like asking someone to choose one or the other, or sacrificing that like one thing, is kind of asking for a lot. um, and I find that being able to embrace both of them, and many other more cultures that I'm involved in, is really liberating, and it helps me better understand who I am, and helps me embrace who I am as like a whole person and not just like sections of myself. So thank you for sharing that, both of you.
All three of you, thank you for sharing just how how beautiful and diverse our identities can be, especially as a legacy of the sacrifices that your parents have made to give you this life in the United States, so that you can hopefully proceed with this healing, growth, and discovery to become who you can become. And my parents are also immigrants. Or have an immigrant experience, and I often feel that as their child, they've made the sacrifices so that I could self-actualize and have the life that I have now, where they had to make them that much more sacrifices so that I could be who I am today. I want to, before inviting questions, so if you have questions, maybe this is the time to think about that, raise your hand or put that in the chat, but I will ask Deryck. We've been talking about cultural identity and especially the refugee immigration identity, but sexuality is also very much a theme that's woven into your story in the play. So can you talk a little bit about the intersectionality between race, immigration, the refugee experience, gender, and sexuality that came up for you as you were developing the play and refining it over all of these years?
Yeah, definitely. Writing this with Tom over the years and just the constant drafts of and the sessions of what is this play? What am I writing? Oh, Tom, this came into my mind today and I threw it in there. And then he'd be like, oh, okay, we could put it in there. And having responses from KCCTF and other theater practitioners from around the United States telling me, okay, so there's these threads of sexuality, culture, and fitting in and being Asian American. Now you just need to like weave them all together into your story. And I think that was the whole struggle, or a big struggle that I was struggling with. I just said struggle 3 times to get this plot out of there. And I think, yeah, growing up as gay, and especially in Minnesota, um, in the farmlands out in the distance, there wasn't very many people I could really connect with. And I think I just had to learn to love myself and be okay with that. And I think the internet was coming up in that time and age, and other people were coming out on the internet. And I think that helped me um, respect myself and realize that my experience is happening all around the world. And I think just the action of seeing that as a young child made me want to do that. And I think that's why I put it in this play, so that I could inspire other people to accept themselves, and to, because something I'm so excited about this play is that I'm going to be able to do it in front of schools pretty soon here. And I just can't wait to, share with other people if they're not out and they see someone on stage saying I'm gay. That will give them the courage to, come out, but like also take their time and realize that it's okay. So I want it to be um not the light, but like the person someone, oh, they went through that experience and I can connect to. So yeah.
I'm sorry to turn off my video because my internet's a little bit off and on here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So Deryck, I'm curious, coming from an immigrant Asian family, if sexuality was harder or, not so much of an issue in terms of grappling with that and your culture, and any expectations that you might have had.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely had that voice in the back of my head, like, oh, your parents are not going to accept you in an Asian culture. You're expected to marry a wife and then have kids and continue the line. And I think that was always in the back of my head. But when I did come out, and they were super accepting, and they would always drop hints here and there, like, oh, I know. And that made me feel safe to come out. But um in distant parts of my family, like not in my immediate family, I haven't come out yet. And I think that fear still exists of, oh, will they look at me differently? Oh, will they accept me? But at the end of the day, I can't live in that space because that's not fair to me to constantly like seek other people's acceptance when all I really need is my own and people I care about. So yeah, it's a constant battle. Each person I come to in my family or someone I knew that I meet, it's always in the back of my head, will they accept me? So every day, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And that makes your desire to help others along just that much more poignant and meaningful. Does anybody in our meeting today have any questions for our panelists so far?
I do.
Welcome. Hello.
Thanks. Hi, my name's John. I'd be curious to hear what you all had to say about, maybe specifically about your experiences as an Asian American in our fair city of Duluth. What's awesome about being Asian American in Duluth and what's not so awesome about being Asian American in Duluth? Thank you.
Who would like to take this first?
I guess I could take it. You know, I having been here for 16 plus years, I'm raising a family here. I've worked in the community for some time now, along with my husband. I think that, you know, aside from, of course, just, you know, the natural beauty that draws people here, the lake that draws people, you know, one thing that I did not expect when I moved to Duluth was how hard it would be for me to get my foot through the door, whether it be in a social setting or maybe in a more professional setting. It did take me a couple of years to finally, even just to find a job. And in order to, you know, my goal was always to build community or to be able to kind of, you know, see how I could contribute to the community in a meaningful way. And sometimes that was hard in itself too. But I felt like I had to really exert, you know, myself in order to find community, to be able to make some friendships. And so far, you know, that has resulted in wonderful people who have helped us take care of our children, our neighbors, because we don't have any family up here. It has resulted in my involvement with, you know, Jennifer and Suenary with the Twin Ports APIDA collective, where we are building a community collective there, made up of APIDA and some non-APIDA members as well. So I think what Duluth has taught me is that it's a, you know, it's a small enough city where not only can you make an impact, but if you truly want to build community, you can do that. And you can, you know, define it however you want, but there's always room to build that community, to make it stronger, because everything that you do, it just, you know, it strengthens the community fabric that we already have. So the fact that we have so many other groups like Family Rise Together, and we have the Duluth Community School Collaboratives, we have ICO. I mean, these are all diverse BIPOC community groups that make Duluth so much more vibrant, so much stronger.
Thanks, Pakou. Suenary, would you like to maybe share?
Yeah. So I have a college student's experience of the city, mostly. Just for the last couple of years, I've had more of a Duluth like like actual Duluth city experience. So when I came to Duluth, I think one of the biggest things that shocked me the most was the like it was kind of hard for me to find some of my Asian foods that I grew up with. So I grew up in Rochester, and we have a couple of Asian grocery stores there, and I always found what I needed. And what I've had to do while living up here is be a little bit more creative with cooking, which has always been fun because then I get to have like my little twist on my foods and stuff like that. And right when I came into college, I joined the Asian Pacific American Association at UMD. And that was kind of my community when I was in school. It was a very great space for me. I felt like I belonged somewhere. And I felt like a lot of the experiences that I've had growing up were validated, I guess, because other people had similar experiences as I did. And I'm not saying that like in Rochester that there aren't any Asian people, because there are plenty of Asian people. But I think when I was able to separate myself from my roots, I guess, from my being home, I was able to better connect with my Asian identity, because then I was always questioning it. Because the more distant I am from my family and the community where it's like just the norm, I felt like I didn't have to question it as much or think about it or reflect on it as much as I did when I came up here. And I think one of the best experiences I've had coming up here, where I was away from family and my community that I grew up with, is being able to explore what it means to be a Cambodian American, or what it means to be an Asian American or a Lao American. And I think up until recently, I was like comfortable in that. And what I mean by recently, after college, I kind of lost a lot of that connection, just because a lot of the people that I had bonded with and became friends with had gone back to their hometowns, like in the city areas and things like that. So I reached out to TPAC when I found out that they were like a thing. So that's been nice to be able to find an Asian community thriving in Duluth. And I think that's like really beautiful, just like what Pakou said about how the ability or the community's ability to thrive and exist and like vocalize their presence in the city is very nice. And I've enjoyed that a lot. And it's been a very meaningful experience for me so far. So yeah.
Thank you, Deryck.
Yeah, thank you. Immediately, I was going to start talking about food, and because I remember my first time I went to an Asian restaurant up here in Duluth after being in college and haven't been around many Asian people. And I remember sitting down in the restaurant and looking around. I'm like, wow, I feel like I'm at my grandma's house right now. And I feel like there's two parts of me in that situation, where when I'm in a predominantly Asian setting, there's a part of me that like awakens, and there's a part of me that I can connect with other people on a different level. But then when I'm not in an Asian setting, there's another part of me where, oh, I can connect with you on this level, because like I'm from Garver, Minnesota. I grew up there, and I grew up around a majority white community, and I know how to be in that scenario, and be comfortable and live in that as well. And I think it's just a lack of places up in Duluth for Asians to feel that way. And that's not a bad thing. It's just the fact of our world. There's not many Asians up there, and that's okay. It's just, history, immigration, and that's just what happens. But I think good things about Duluth is you find those pockets and they're just that much more special because you're like, there's not that many. So, but on the bad side, there's not that many pockets. So yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions at the moment or follow-up? I see a hand. Alexandra, is that right?
Yes, that's right. I was wondering, just as a fellow POC person, I have had to code switch a lot to fit in when I was living in Duluth. And I was wondering if there have been instances and experiences where you have felt the need to like code switch when it comes to like not speaking your native language or modifying the way that you are speaking in any particular setting when you are interacting with people that are not a part of your culture.
Thank you, Alexandra. Who would like to take this or take it first? Deryck.
I relate to that so much, and I love how you use the word code switching. That just encapsulates it so much. And yes, there has been so many scenarios, not just through just being Asian American, but also being gay. Of walking into, God, I hate this analogy, but it's there's some truth to it, of walking into like a barber shop and having to like deepen your voice and not do some certain mannerisms and like not cross your legs in order to protect yourself in a way from that sort of feeling, but also being Asian American and going to sporting events at UMD and dressing up in UMD logos and not how you would, just like all those thoughts in your brain of how can I change who I am, what I wear, how I act in order to be the best person that others are expecting me to be in this scenario. Yeah, I relate to that so much. Thank you for that question,
Yeah, and for me, I've had to do that in professional settings just because part of it is, you have to kind of read the room as to who's with you there, and you're trying to guess at others' expectations of you and the role that you play, in the community, but also with, the professional position that you're in. So, I think part of that comes with trying to find a way to belong, to be welcomed, but also trying not to awash yourself of your own, your true values and your culture, just so that you can please someone else, or so that so that you can fit their agenda. So I would like to see a little bit more of a two-way conversation about how who I am can contribute to the values of an organization that I work with. And I'm very fortunate to have that right now where I work, but it wasn't always the case.
So I think one of like my experiences with code switching was just one example. I have like clear memories of being at UMD and occupying the space, the multicultural center space. That's that used to be like my go-to place because I felt very comfortable being loud and vocal and just very expressive. And I felt like I could be me and I could talk about who I was as an Asian American person in the space and not feel judged for it. But then right when I would walk out of that space, I just feel like I can't talk about it as much anymore. Like I'll go to my classes and I feel like I'm not as expressive, and I have a lot of things that I want to say, but I feel like sometimes I just can't say it because I'm in a space where I feel like I have to minimize myself a little bit or shrink myself down just because it just doesn't feel as safe to me. And those are like some of the experiences that I've had with code switching here in Duluth. Just, yeah, I'm just trying to like think about how to put the story together. But I think even now I'm code switching a little bit. Like, I feel like I know that there's this space that's supposed to be open and inviting. And I hope that this, like me saying this doesn't offend anyone, but it's just like, I feel like a mechanism that just like activates when I'm in a space that I'm not super familiar with. Even though there are some of my Asian fellows here. But yeah, I think that it's a really strange experience, code switching, but it feels almost necessary and it feels very automatic. Sometimes like you can't catch yourself doing it. But then after a while, you just think about it, like, why did I do this when I normally would do it this way? Or why did I say this when I would normally say it this way? And even sometimes when I'm in conversations with people about certain things that are like Cambodian related, something like language. I'm not someone who's very familiar with my language. I'm not fluent in Khmer at all. I'm actually taking classes to learn, but I'm not fluent in it. But I feel like I have to change the way I say certain words that are in Khmer to have it fit other people's understanding of that word. Like the word Khmer, for example, most people would know that word as Khmer, but in our language, we would call that word Khmer. That's just like one example. So I find myself saying Khmer Rouge sometimes, even though my family would definitely say Khmer Rouge. Little things like that. Code switching is so weird.
Deryck, I actually noticed you used both in your play, Khmer and Khmer.
I did. I was right when you were saying that, Suenary. I was going back and learning to my memories of learning that word first from my dad. I'm like, why is it not Khmer? It's like Khmer, and then it's like Khmer, and then even just in production, our note sessions after run-throughs of our play, our lighting designer had this question of, you used Khmer and then it's also spelled Khmer. Is that a mistake? And I think why I said it Khmer and Khmer in the play is just to highlight that experience even more of, oh, it can be pronounced this way, but this is how an American lens would view that word. And I just wanted to, pose that question to audiences of like, oh, okay, so yeah, thank you for catching that, Jennifer.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
That was a great question, by the way, Alexandra. I like that one a lot.
Yeah. I have one. I mean, kind of tagging onto this, I think about my own experience of code switching. There was a time, in a more innocent time, when my children were small, that I actually took great pride in trying to raise them to be bilingual. I actually took great pride in the playgrounds of Madison, Wisconsin, where I had my first child, to speak Chinese on the playground with my daughter. And I've definitely noticed in the last 4 to 5 years that I have completely stopped taking pride in that in public. And, you know, it has to do with, I think, my perception of a changing reception to the immigrant experience, especially an immigrant experience not from Europe. Of course, you know, in the last 2 years, it's only gotten more and more heightened with the anti-Asian hate coming from the pandemic. And I wonder if any of our panelists would like to take it, you know, one step further and talk about, you know, taking up space in the identities that you take up space in the current climate of the last couple of years.
Yes, I was about to say this right before you asked the question, but it fits with the question as well. So it's that constant voice in your head of am I allowed to take space? Like even now in this discussion, I'm having this thought in my brain is like, oh, am I talking about myself or talking about my experience too much? Am I allowed to do that? And even in this safe space, which we acknowledge is a safe space, I still have that voice in my head of am I allowed to share my experience? And even now with the articles and stuff coming about Olympic medalist Suenary Lee and her getting pepper sprayed out of nowhere and all this anti-Asian hate, especially with the past few years, I think that voice in my head is just magnified. Am I allowed to take space here? Are you safe to do so? Are you protecting yourself? And I think that voice is always just going to be there. But I think through discussions like this helps us acknowledge that voice and to say, hey, yeah, you're there, but it's okay to share yourself in this space. Thank you for warning me, but right now I'm safe, you know? So I think talking about it is the best way possible to acknowledge those feelings and to work through it. So yeah.
Deryck, I really appreciate in several answers that you've given today. Like you have identified an issue and a problem, but you always just in this very generous way transcend it and try to make something better out of it. So I just want to acknowledge that and thank you for that energy that you bring to the table. Pakou.
Yeah, I just wanted to, you know, add on that you know, with the situation of anti-hate, it seems like, you know, as we take one step forward, you know, Suenary Lee, first Hmong woman to receive a gold medal at the Olympics. We're taking several steps backwards, right? Well-known international figure now gets pepper sprayed in Los Angeles while she's, you know, just walking with her friends. So it seems like, you know, as we're taking steps forward, we're also taking multiple steps backwards. And I feel like we're finally moving in a good direction because people are waking up. People are taking activism much more forcefully. You know, we've got at least 3 APIDA members who are now mayors of major cities across the country. We've got multiple legislators who are, you know, BIPOC, and several who are actually Hmong in Minnesota. So I feel like this is, despite all of the negative things that have happened, it has really brought people, it has really, you know, fired up their passion to do something good. And I think that's what I've witnessed, and that gives me hope, because I certainly want to make sure that my own children and other children don't continue to live under this dark umbrella, really dark cloud of anti-Asian sentiment and hate crimes, and that we can rise above it, but we can't do it alone. I think that's evident in this country. We can't do it alone. And we also have to be the voices that educate, that raise awareness. Because if we don't do it, if we don't bring light to these issues, to things that are affecting the APIDA community, then who will?
Thanks, Pakou. Suenary, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I apologize for bringing this up like in the middle of the conversation. My name's actually pronounced Sunali with an L. It's spelled with an R, but it's spelled with an L. I've just been like kind of debating through this whole like conversation with myself about whether I should be correcting anyone. And I don't have any hard feelings, like no worries, I'm not offended at all, but I just thought that I should just say that for myself. And I would have gone this whole talk without mentioning it, but I felt like that I would be doing sort of like a disservice to myself if I didn't. And I had an experience last year with someone that I knew who was saying my name wrong and wasn't very kind about it behind my back. And I confronted them about it and it didn't really go super well. So I've just been like back and forth about like reclaiming how to say my name versus also like using my Starbucks name or like using a different version of my name. And I think that right now like would be a good time to just address that. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned it earlier, but I just felt really uncomfortable about it just because I had that experience and it didn't go super well. So yeah, I just thank you so much.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. This goes to show also the diversity of our APIDA community, where I have been also known to say like somebody from China and somebody from Cambodia really don't have that similar of cultures and language roots. So I am also always learning. So I really, really appreciate your bringing this up so that I can learn from you. And thank you for your grace. I've been misnaming you all day.
It's okay. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I should have
No.
corrected you.
No apologies needed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Does anybody here have any more questions for our panelists? If not, maybe I will just ask you to wrap up our time here with, we are in a time, especially now in history, where refugees are on the radar screen of many people these days. In particular, the refugees who are flowing in from Afghanistan. What about your refugee experience, immigration experience in Minnesota? Do you wish the average person would understand?
I think that the one thing that is clear is that no one knows your story unless you tell them. I think that there's enough information out there, enough international news talking about the Afghanistan refugees, whereby it is helping to educate the world about their needs, why they are fleeing Afghanistan. I'd like to think that communities are going to welcome them with open arms, understanding that they are victims of circumstances that they just don't control. It's not like it's not as if refugees are looking to flee their countries. They leave because they don't have a choice. It's about safety. It's about survival. It's about, bringing hope to their families. So that's something that I think our communities can understand. And that regardless of whether you come here on a work visa or student visa, or if you come here as an immigrant and then continue to stay and become a naturalized citizen through the process, or come in as a refugee, I think that, our world, our circle has to be bigger. It can be bigger, because that's how we dignify people, is to be welcoming, to understand, to learn.
Thank you. Sonali or Deryck?
Yeah, I just want to bounce off of that. I'm just so grateful for everybody here listening to this discussion happening, and to listen, to be open, and to learn, and to want to know how a group of people's experience goes on every day with everyone around you. And I think just the action of wanting to understand someone else's experience is so, it is, I don't even know what word it is. It's an amazing thing, and our political climate could really use that. And so I think I just wanted to say thank you for coming here, taking time out of your day, out of all of your busy lives, to come and listen to an experience. So thank you.
I think one thing that comes to mind is, to answer Jennifer's question, is that it's really hard to hear when people say like things like "go back to your country" or "go back home" or things like that, because I feel like a lot of times immigrants and refugees do want to go home. They left behind something that's very familiar, very comforting, um, very much themselves, and they leave it behind to move to countries either to find better opportunities for themselves or their families or the generations to come. And I think it's really important to understand that to come to a different country is always a sacrifice, and it's very hard to have to leave your home, something that like your whole life maybe, or something that your family has known for their whole lives, and just uproot your lives and leave that to a place where that you're not very familiar with, or that might not be as accepting as the place that you previously were. And it's very harmful to hear when people say things like "go back home" or "go back to your own country," because I mean, sometimes people who leave do want to be there, but there are other factors that have made them moved. Like, for example, to connect with Deryck's performance and his story, my parents moved to the US because there was war happening. There was genocide happening. in their homes, and they had no other choice but to go to a country that didn't have an active war or a genocide happening in that country. And my mom always tells me, like, one day she wants to go back to Cambodia someday when she gets her US citizenship. But it's, so like thinking about that changes my perspective growing up, because I always thought like, well, if things were different, then maybe we would still be there, if that makes sense. I don't know. I'm grateful to be here though, and I'm glad that my family is able to flourish in a place that is very unfamiliar to them and sometimes not accepting or loving towards them. It's definitely hard, but I'm just grateful for their resilience and the strength that they have, and the strength and resilience they've passed on and showed me. So yeah, that's a little something, I guess, that I hope people get to learn more about.
Thank you for bringing up the push factors behind why people want to leave their home to become a refugee in another country, and for your reminders. I see a hand up. Is it Geiger? I'm not sure. You're muted.
Sometimes it is, but that's not how I pronounce it. And I raised my hand because I just want to applaud Sonali for telling us, in improving our understanding of how we should pronounce her name. I wonder, how is your surname pronounced, your second name?
You're muted, Sonali.
It's Philavanh. Philavanh.
Okay.
Yeah, so a little history behind my name. My first name is actually a Thai name. I'm not actually Thai, but the name Sonali is a very popular name. It was the name, or is the name, of a very popular like Thai singer that my dad and my grandpa loved. So they named me Sonali. And my last name is Philavanh, and that's my dad's last name, and it's a Lao last name.
Okay. Well, I would encourage you to be gentle but forthcoming and help people to be comfortable pronouncing your name. In the centuries of people immigrating to North America, the names get garbled. You know, the people writing names down coming off the ships will do their best shot at spelling the name, and then people in varying degrees will change the spelling of their names or shorten the names, drop syllables, or do whatever. But you're free to keep the spelling and the pronunciation for as long as you're willing to do that. And mine, I pronounce my name Giger, but it's spelled Geiger, which is the German pronunciation. The Swiss say Giger. And the cultural thing in my not so large family, only the real ones still stick to saying Giger. It makes people uncomfortable, as you saw Jennifer hesitate a bit about how she should pronounce it. So Sonali, stick with it. Enjoy your name and have fun with it.
Thank you so much, Giger. And I also saw in the chat that Alexandra commented too. Thank you so much for that. Both of your comments are so uplifting and very empowering. And I feel a lot better. Thank you so much for that. I'm just so overwhelmed with all of this. Thank you.
I'm so glad. Thank you for piping up, Giger. I think I'm ready to hand this back to Mary.
Oh, well, oh my goodness. Thank you all so much, especially to this panel. In this short time that we are all together, I think that it's safe to say I'm in awe of every one of you speaking up and being here, and I am so thankful to have been a part of this with all of you in this room, including everybody who signed on. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you for going over a little time. I feel like I just want to be like, should we be here till 10? But I think there was some really incredible things. And I do want to say on behalf of Zeitgeist and theater and in our storytelling, these things are just the beginning of where we can start. And this panel shouldn't just end here. I'd love to keep this conversation going in whatever way it wants to. And I think this is a start for a lot of us to continue to support our lovely people in this community. And my mind and heart is going nuts. And so I will just say thank you. Is there anything, Deryck, do you want to give a shout out of what's happening next in your life? And if TPAC wants to say if there's any events or things that we can pay attention to, I'll let Deryck go. Speak to that.
Yes, so I'm Min in the History Theater's production of Christmas of Swing. We open on Saturday and we run until December 19th. Come see it in St. Paul. I know it's a bit of a drive from Duluth, but that's where I'll be, and I think it's just gonna be fun. So yeah.
Pakou, do you want to take it for TPAC?
Sure. TPAC and the Duluth Art Institute have partnered together to create a multimedia, diverse representation of various APIDA members in the Twin Ports for an exhibit we call Like Me, Like You. And that will be on display at the Steffel Gallery at the Duluth Art Institute from about mid-January until March. And so more information will be coming out soon, but we look forward to having the community come and learn about your neighbors, your friends that come from various APIDA countries and cultures.
Oh, thank you. Sunali, is there anything in your world that you'd like to share or add? Same to you, Jennifer.
No, Pakou just said everything for us, I think.
Fantastic. Oh,
yeah,
yes.
thank you for asking. This will be a few months down the road, but I will be giving a recital at St. Scholastica in the spring that covers, that juxtaposes music from the European fascination with the Orient and music by Asian American composers. So hopefully you'll be able to find that on the calendar next semester and check it out.
That is wonderful. Thank you. We will. And we do have some funders to thank to make this possible. Stevie, I'm wondering if you could just say them out loud so we can acknowledge the support.
Yes, we were funded by the Global Awareness Fund of the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation, the Lloyd K. Johnson Foundation, and the Northland Foundation.
Yay! And I think that that's it. And again, let's keep the conversation going. I would love to stay connected, and best of luck to everybody. stay healthy and safe, and much love, and sending all that peace and love to everybody here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for joining.
Bye.